Welcome to Rooted with Rachel. My name is Rachel Boucher, and this is where you'll find fresh joy for your journey. Today is Holy Tuesday in Holy Week, and we're reading in Psalm 22, 6 through 11. So write out this psalm and look at the words, and I cannot wait to share with you what I came across a few years back when I studied this psalm about that word, worm, in the psalm, and it is fascinating. I'm going to share it with you in just a minute, but first let's look over this entire section. So Psalm 22, 6 through 11 says, "But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Yet you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breast. On you was I cast from my birth, and from my mother's womb you have been my God. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is none to help." The passage begins by David saying, "I am a worm and not a man, despised by mankind and the people," in contrast to his focus on God's holiness. In verse 3, we see David's realization of his own condition before a holy God. He talks about how they're saying things like, well, if he trusts God, let God deliver him, let God rescue him. And we hear this echoed in the Gospels. In Jesus' life, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows. We saw yesterday in the first 5 verses, he mentions 3 times the word trust. He goes back and he remembers how God led his people out and rescued his people. He talks about his father's trusting in him and that he puts his trust in him as well. And we see this on the cross when Jesus exclaims, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." This is that tension we sometimes feel here. We're battling where we're at currently in our circumstances and how that makes us see things as we struggle with our view of God in the midst of feeling forsaken. We see him again in this section go back to that word yet. Yet you brought me forth from my mother's womb, he says, and you made me trust in you. We also see that word trust come up again, and we feel that tension, don't we? We're wrestling with our circumstances and what we know to be true about God and what we're feeling and all these hard things that create so much tension. In the midst of this struggle, he's recognizing that God made him trust in him from birth, from his mother's womb. He ordained each day. And then he says this, "But trouble is near. Trouble is near, and there is none to help." Think back on Jesus' life and remember the Garden of Gethsemane where he wrestled with the circumstances and the burden that was placed on him, but he willingly yielded to the Father's will and went to the cross. It says he did this for the joy that was set before him. He endured the cross, despising the shame, and he's seated at the right hand of the throne of God. What we see in this psalm is a picture of Jesus' suffering mirrored in David's suffering. Now, we come back to that word worm, and I just love how God uses creation to paint a picture of the gospel for us. When I first came across this, I thought it was strange. And I thought, well, he's saying maybe I'm just nothing. I'm a worm, I'm nothing, I'm not a man. But the word typically used for worm in Scripture is maggot, like an everyday maggot. But this word, the Hebrew word in this verse, is totally different. It is a specific type of worm. Follow me here, okay? So instead of just saying a worm, he's naming a type of worm. And the scientific word for this worm is Coccus ilicis. It is a crimson worm, look it up, or a scarlet worm. Let that sink in for a minute. Actually, they use these worms, particularly the substance that came out of these worms, for dyeing fabric red. So here you have this worm, this specific worm, and when they're ready to have offspring, they will attach themselves to a piece of wood. like a tree or a post. They are so attached, they are so committed that in order for them to come off of it, you would have to rip the worm apart. So they attach themselves to this tree, and then they have offspring, and the offspring are sort of hidden underneath their body. And when the offspring hatch, they begin to eat the flesh of the worm. And when that happens, the worm then releases a substance that stains the offspring red. It stains them crimson red. Then the worm will die and fall off the tree, and it turns white. Okay, is your mind blown yet? Because this totally blew my mind. There's so many connections as we think about this and what Christ accomplished on the cross. He was committed. He was not going to come down off of that cross. He was committed to following through in order to fulfill everything. But not only that, his blood cleanses us, and we are stained by his blood, washed by his blood, because he sacrificed himself and died in our place. Isn't it amazing how God uses created things to illustrate a picture of what Christ accomplished on the cross? I was so excited to be able to share this with you today, and I just love this picture of how Jesus was fully committed to the cross in order to fulfill God's plan to appease and absorb God's wrath on the cross, because we could never do that for ourselves. What a beautiful picture. I just love it when God uses and reveals these little nuggets like this from creation, and I'm in awe of how he uses these things to illustrate what Christ accomplished on the cross. So meditate on this truth today. Christ was committed to the cross, and he was committed to the will of the Father for us, because we couldn't do it for ourselves. We couldn't rescue ourselves, and we needed him to give his life for us to appease the wrath of God for us, so that we could be justified, so that we could be clean and washed by his blood that is poured out for us. When trouble is near, the only one who can help is the one who makes us trust in him. We rely on his work on the cross through his beloved Son. Even in the face of scorn and mocking, he is worthy of our trust, and he is the only one who can help. Be not far from me, O God, for there is none to help but you. You're all I've got.